questa riunione. Io sono, devo dire, molto felice di essere riuscita a venire qui. Stamattina ero alla FAO, oggi è il 22 di marzo, la Giornata Mondiale Dell'Acqua, e vi faccio i miei auguri per questa giornata. E quindi ho preso un treno e sono venuta perché avevo molto piacere ed ero effettivamente lusingata di poter partecipare a questo panel illustre e ringrazio veramente il Presidente della Fondazione Mediterraneo e il Professor Iaccarino per l'invito. I precedenti relatori hanno parlato di acqua in vario modo, e direi prendendo spunti scientifici e non solamente. Un aspetto interessante è stato quello di vedere una prospettiva diversa, quella tra acqua e cultura. Noi con il Rapporto Mondiale delle Risorse Idriche, del World Water Development Report, ogni anno dal 2014 ci occupiamo di un tema specifico e normalmente dal 2014 in avanti ci siamo occupati di temi, diciamo, scientifici. Quindi la prima volta che noi abbiamo realizzato un'edizione annuale è stato nel 2014 e il tema era acqua ed energia. Nel 2015 ovviamente ci siamo occupati dello sviluppo sostenibile, perché era il 2015 con l'agenda 2030 e con gli obiettivi di sviluppo sostenibile. E poi avanti con acqua e lavoro, impiego, nel 2016, nel 2017 acqua e riuso dell'acqua, quindi l'acqua cioè il trattamento delle acque. 2017 ci siamo occupati di natural based solution, cioè di tutte le soluzioni che possono essere utilizzate per l'acqua. Quest'anno ci occupiamo invece di un aspetto particolare, perché direi giustamente ci occupiamo di questo, perché rispondiamo al messaggio dell'agenda 2030 di quelli no one left behind, cioè non lasciare nessuno indietro. E quindi ci occupiamo di vedere l'acqua in relazione con gli aspetti sociali e in particolare con la parte della società che è in difficoltà, cioè gli esclusi, i discriminati, quelli che per qualche motivo sono i più vulnerabili. La mia presentazione è una presentazione in inglese. C'è un trucco, allora io l'ho fatta in inglese perché stamattina l'ho fatta in inglese, quindi ve la presento in inglese, ma visto che io ho un amore viscerale per Napoli, è una scusa perché tra un mese ve la faccio in italiano, mi invitate di nuovo, tra 2 mesi ve la faccio in napoletano e così tutti i mesi vengo qua. Allora, bene, il professor Iaccarino aveva già introdotto che cos'è il UN Water, questa piattaforma di coordinamento delle agenzie delle Nazioni Unite, che contribuisce con gli input delle proprie agenzie alla realizzazione di questo rapporto. Noi come WAP lo uniamo tutte queste informazioni, ne coordiniamo il lavoro in una produzione che dura 2 anni e viene pubblicato dall'UNESCO annualmente. Allora, and now I speak in English. In 2010, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a historical resolution recognizing the right to safe and clean drinking water and sanitation as human right that is essential for the full enjoyment of life, and all human rights. International human rights law obliges states to work towards achieving universal access to water and sanitation for all without discrimination, while prioritizing those most in need. Human rights define individuals as right holders entitled to water and sanitation, and states as duty bearers that have to guarantee access to water for all, using the maximum of their resources. The UN resolution is very precise. Fulfillment of the human rights to water and sanitation requires that the services should be available, physically accessible, equitably affordable, safe, and culturally acceptable. Nonetheless, yet billions of people still lack safe water and sanitation facilities, and people are being left behind for reasons related to their gender, age, ethnicity, culture, migration status, socioeconomic status, among others. In 2015, it was estimated that 2.1 billion people, which means 3 out of 10 people, do not have access to safe drinking water, and 4.5 billion people, the double, 6 out of 10, do not have access to safely managed sanitation services. In terms of both the number of people affected, and this is something that Andres showed before, and especially the number of people killed, the impact of flood, drought, and conflicts are grossly outweighed by the number of those killed by inadequate drinking water and sanitation services. We now analyze what are the drivers and consequences of poverty and discrimination, and of course we start with population growth, which is a significant driver of increasing water demand. The global population reached 7.6 billion people in 2017, and it is expected to increase up to almost 10 billion, 9.8 billion by 2050. Africa and Asia account for nearly all current population growth, although Africa is expected to be the main contributor beyond 2050. Africa is, of course, the curve, the red one. The second driver is urbanization. Nearly all net population growth is taking place in cities. The world is becoming increasingly urbanized. In the least developed countries, nearly 2/3, 62% of urban dwellers live in slum conditions, and slums remain very pervasive, most pervasive in sub-Saharan Africa. The third driver is extreme poverty. In 2013, more than 10% of the global population, that is 767 million people, were living below the international extreme poverty line of $1.90 per day. And 2.1 billion people, about 30% of the global population, were living on less than $3.1 a day. The challenges of living in poverty can differ considerably between urban and rural settlement, just like the potential or possible responses and solutions. Nearly 80% of the extreme poor lived in rural area. Another driver is education and employment. Water and sanitation facilities in schools are fundamental for promoting good hygienic behavior and children's health and well-being. Lack of latrines and safe water for drinking and hygiene, and otherwise inappropriate and inadequate sanitary facilities contribute to absenteeism and high dropout rates, especially among girls when sex-segregated washrooms are absent. An estimated 3 out of 4 jobs are water dependent. This was the main finding of the WWDR 2016. Access to adequate and gender-segregated wash facilities in the workplace has been linked to increased productivity, especially among women. But who is being left behind? Different people from different groups are left behind for different reasons. Ethnic and other minorities, including indigenous people, migrants, refugees, people of certain ancestries like caste, religious and linguistic minorities, and in some parts of the world, women and girls experience discrimination and inequalities in the enjoyment of their human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation. And the same is for people that are very young or very old, and also persons with disabilities that are very much represented among those who lack access to safe drinking water and sanitation. The challenges faced by those left behind are directly related to where they live. And this is the approach that the WWDR, when we produced the report, has taken when examining these challenges and potential solutions or opportunities. And the first setting is urban setting. Substantial inequalities exist between slum and no-slum households regarding access to water and sanitation facilities. Rapid urbanization means that pockets of slum areas will continue to emerge. In terms of water supply, piped water is the least costly method to transport water in densely populated areas. Where piped networks are unavailable, people mostly rely on wells or community water system supply, that is like water kiosk or a truck or vendors. In the latter case, they often pay prices several times higher for water with less quality. People living in informal settings like slums with no formal physical address are regularly excluded from water and sanitation provision schemes. Their lack of legal status, in many cases they don't pay taxes, they don't have a formal address, or they don't have rental, means that are often overlooked by authorities and service providers, of course, on the basis that they are invisible, they are hidden, lost in aggregated statistics. And then there are the rural settings. As mentioned earlier, nearly 80% of people living in extreme poverty live in rural areas. The vast majority of the rural poor are smallholder family members. While they constitute the backbone of national food supply, because they produce a small agricultural production, and this in many countries, they themselves often suffer from food insecurity and malnutrition. For Africa, farms up to 2 hectares are estimated to constitute 75% of the farms and operate 24% of the farmland. According to FAO, Approximately 80% of the global cropland is rain-fed, and 60% of the world's food is produced on rain-fed land. Supplemental irrigation in rain-fed agricultural system may not only ensure crop survival, but also double or even triple rain-fed yields, and farming become a reliable source of livelihood. Inequalities in land ownership can translate into unequal access to and benefit from water resources. And this is the example of women in certain countries, and women in equal rights to inheritance and land ownership that translate in discrimination with respect to water allocation. And then the other setting that are the refugees camps. Away from home, refugees and internally displaced people are among the most vulnerable and disadvantaged groups, often faced with barriers to access basic water supply and sanitation services. By the end of the year 2017, an unprecedented 68.5 million people have been displaced, forcibly displaced from their homes as a result of conflict, persecution, or human rights violation. Always in the same year, in 2017, 18.8 million people were displaced by sudden onset disasters, a situation that is likely to worsen because of climate change. But in 2016, this was much higher. It was like 24 million people. Almost a quarter of forcibly displaced people live in camps, but the overwhelming majority are hosted in cities, in slums, towns and villages. These refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced people and stateless persons are often not officially recognized by local and national governments and are therefore excluded from development agenda and programs. Mass displacement places strain upon water resources and related services, including sanitation and hygiene, at transition of the transit countries and destination points, the destination countries, for both existing population, people that live there, and the new arrivals, creating potential inequalities and a source of conflict among them. There is an example that is a very good example that I want to report to you about the Zaatari camp. The Zaatari refugee camp is located in northern Jordan, and it is in a place in which there is a heavily water-stressed area. It was initially set up in a haste in response to the flux of refugees coming from Syria, and it was lacking of planning and proper structure. This results in outbreaks of different diseases, measles, scabies, diarrhea, hepatitis, and other diseases, mainly attributed to deficient amount of clean water and poor sanitation. Tensions were also manifested between the group hosted in the refugee camp and the neighbors. And in response, international humanitarian organizations and non-governmental organizations started working with the Jordanian Ministry of Water and Irrigation and with host communities to improve access to clean water supply and sanitation services in the camp, as well as in the neighboring areas. This included the rehabilitation of existing water wells and drilling of additional wells to respond to the increasing water demands. Rehabilitation works also performed on aging water network and transmission lines services the area. And also the wastewater collection. The wastewater collection infrastructure was rehabilitated and wastewater treatment plant capacity were expanded to accommodate the growing volume of wastewater generated. In addition to helping the refugees, these collective and cooperative efforts also contribute to improving water infrastructure and services to host communities, to the neighbors in this water-stressed region. In terms of solution, we took into account two primary aspects. One is funding financing, and the other is good governance. He likes you. Oh, I don't know what is this. No. We need to go up here.
Okay.
Maybe not. Because this is the loop. I think it's the
Cliccate su bianco.
Which one? Quale? Oh, thank you. Grazie. Okay. Current level of funding towards wash services are below the capital cost required to meet basic wash services by 2030. Just to read the graph, the black is annual spending, what the countries are spending for wash. The gray is the annual requirement to meet basic wash by 2030, so what they should put for the basic wash. And the red one is the annual requirements to meet safety managed wash by 2030. So a threshold increase in current annual investment level up to 114 billion US dollars would be needed to meet the capital cost required for achieve safe wash services without considering maintenance and operation cost. Although government wash budgets are increasing at an annual rate of 4.9%, over 80% of monetary countries that are 110 report having insufficient financing to attain their drinking water, sanitation, and water quality national objectives in urban areas, while the share increased at 90% when referring rural areas. Global cost-benefit studies have demonstrated that wash services provide good social and economic returns when compared with their cost. There are now available many funding and financing mechanisms and sources to enhance the wash services. However, increasing the amount of funding and investment alone does not necessarily ensure that wash services will reach all those who are most disadvantaged. Subsidies must be appropriately designed. They should be transparent and targeted. And tariff structures need to be designed and implemented with the objective of achieving equity, affordability, and the appropriate level of service for each target group. No. Okay. Let's start with the other one. Okay. Good governance. Good governance covers the invisible part of water management as compared to water-related infrastructures that are dams, reservoirs, the pipes networks, etc. Well-functioning accountability mechanisms help institutions with sufficient capacity fulfill their mandate to monitor and enforce the obligation of service providers. Having inclusive institutional structures in place for multi-stakeholder dialogue and cooperation is essential to ensuring equitable access to sustainable water supply and sanitation services. This includes also non-governmental organizations in expressing the opinion of civil societies, and large corporations that also have a great deal of influence over policy making. The human rights-based approach advocates for the fundamental standards, principle, and criteria of human rights frameworks. Good governance relates to systems that have qualities of accountability, transparency, legitimacy, public participation, justice, and efficiency, and therefore overlaps with the principle of the human rights-based approach. Ensuring that affordable wash services are available to all require responses tailored to specific target groups in various vulnerable situations. Given that poor and vulnerable groups are not homogeneous, wash policies need to distinguish between different populations and prepare specific actions to address each of them. Disaggregated data with respect to gender, age, income groups, ethnicity, geography should be an asset, should be included in all type of project and program, research program, and planning the action. And these include social inclusion analysis are key tools in determining which group are in greatest risk of being left behind and why. And then there is the institutional capacity. Improve the institutional capacity is required to assist and facilitate policy reforms and citizen participation at the appropriate levels of decision making and policy implementation on the ground. The development of human capacity through vocational, technical, and academic training needs to be supported, especially at local and community levels. And now the takeaway messages from all what we wrote and the findings that we had in the WWDR. We can synthesize in this list of messages. One is of course the access to safe, affordable, and reliable drinking water and sanitation services are basic human rights. And billions of people are still being left behind. In particular, poor often pay a much higher price for a service of similar or lesser quality than rich people. In terms of policies, policy recommendations need to be tailored to specific target groups. And when I say target group, are those groups that I listed before, that particular like migrants, like particularly excluded from the other people. In terms of agriculture, supplementary irrigation can make a difference for farmer livelihoods. Mass displacement can strain water-related services for both existing population, people that live there, and new arrivals, creating potential conflicts. Investing in water supplies and sanitation in general makes good economic sense. And finally, good governance overcomes vested interest and exclusionary practices. And with this I conclude my presentation and I thank you for your attention. Grazie mille.